I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're standing right in the middle of your bedroom. You have a cucumber in your hand. You have absolutely no idea why. You're actually looking for your iron, which logically you know shouldn't be in the refrigerator, but some deeply terrifying, frantic part of your brain is absolutely convinced that's exactly where you left it. Meanwhile, your phone is buzzing on the bed, there's a pop song looping relentlessly in your head, and you are intensely physically aware of the exact texture of your socks. It's this visceral, chaotic, unfiltered collision of reality and distraction, a mind completely losing its grip on the present moment. Now look, we all feel this modern anxiety, right? This crushing weight of constant distraction. But for millions and millions of people, this isn't just a bad morning where they haven't had their coffee yet. It is every single waking second of their lives.
So, what actually happens when your brain filters absolutely nothing? When every single thought, every impulse, and every tiny environmental trigger demands your full attention, all at the exact same time? The modern world loves to throw around the term ADHD as this, quirky punchline for procrastination. We joke about it, but the reality is so much more gripping than that. It's a central mystery of human psychology, and it offers a profound look into what it actually means to navigate this world without a psychological filter.
Welcome to this explainer on the paradox of the unfiltered mind. For decades, we've casually dismissed attention-deficit hyperactivity disorder as a simple childhood behavioral issue. You know the stereotype, a kid who just can't sit still in a classroom. But that outdated, textbook definition hides a profound neurological mystery. It's a paradox that creates extreme geniuses, unimaginable tragedies, and a lifetime of invisible internal emotional warfare.
Section 1. The Paradox of Potential. Same disorder, opposing destinies.
To truly grasp this condition, you have to look at its terrifying unpredictability. This isn't a disorder that simply makes you bad at math or a little forgetful. It's an amplifier, pushing human potential to absolute polar extremes. On one side of the spectrum, you have someone like Michael Phelps, 23 Olympic gold medals, an absolute machine of singular, unbreakable focus. But then, on the other side, you have the incredibly tragic case of the screen killers, two teenagers who watched a horror movie and, completely failing to control their impulses, went out and acted it out in reality. During the trial, the defense actually leaned heavily on the fact that one of the killers had severe ADHD, arguing his brain was literally incapable of hitting the brakes on a horrific impulse. Phelps and the killers, world-class focus and deadly impulsivity, both driven by the exact same neurological condition. How is that even possible?
Well, the answer lies in the orbitofrontal cortex, or the OFC for short. It's this tiny little region located in the right hemisphere of your brain, and you can think of it as the ultimate gatekeeper. It is the filter for your emotions, your feelings, and your impulses. When you feel a sudden urge to, say, buy something you definitely can't afford or say something you really shouldn't say to your boss, the OFC is the adult in the room that steps in and says, "Whoa, hold on, let's think about this first." But researchers have found that in the ADHD brain, this region is actually physically smaller. The filter is broken.
And this broken filter creates an absolutely shocking biological paradox. If you take a normal brain and give it a difficult task to focus on, like reading a dense book, an MRI shows electrical activity spiking. The brain powers up to meet the challenge. But when people with ADHD try to focus on that exact same task, their brain's power literally drains away. The harder they try to force their brain to perform, the less electricity flows. It's like pressing the gas pedal to the floor and watching the engine stall out completely.
Section 2. Not a deficit, a flood. The myth of missing attention.
We really need to shift the paradigm right now, because the very name of the disorder, attention deficit, is a tragic misunderstanding of what's actually happening. The attention tank isn't empty. It is an agonizing flood. I want you to imagine standing in a tiny room where 100 televisions are playing at maximum volume on 100 different channels, and someone tells you to just watch one. Every single thought, every lingering anxiety from yesterday, every passing impulse, every emotion, they all demand equal attention simultaneously. Because that OXC filter we talked about is broken, the brain completely lacks the ability to prioritize. The attention is there, it's just being violently pulled in 1,000 different directions at once. And this malfunction creates these incredibly jarring contradictions in everyday life. For instance, it creates what's called time illiteracy, where someone might look up and literally not realize that 6 hours have just passed. Or the reverse happens, hyperfocus. They lock into a video game or a new project, and the entire outside world just disappears. You also see wild extremes in physical coordination. A person might drop their coffee mug every single morning, yet possess the exact same neurological wiring that creates world-class Olympic gymnasts like Simone Biles. And then there's the deeply painful aspect of social blindness. Because the OFC is also in charge of interpreting non-linguistic emotional cues, someone with ADHD might completely miss the fact that you're yawning, or that you're secretly angry, or that you're trying to politely end a conversation. They just don't see it.
Section 3. The roots of harmony, where the filter forms. So where does this broken filter actually come from? To understand this, we have to travel back to the emotional, high-stakes origins of the human mind. We have to go all the way back to infancy. You see, unlike a horse that can stand up and run around the exact day it's born, human beings are born incredibly premature. Our brains develop largely outside the womb, in the real world. And this process is called neural Darwinism. It is a ruthless biological competition. The developing brain essentially looks at the child's environment and says, okay, which nerve connections do we actually need to survive out here? The pathways that get used are strengthened, and the ones that aren't used, they are literally starved and pruned away. It is this cinematic, fragile timeline of development. At just 6 days old, an infant distinguishes its mother's scent. By 7 weeks, it's locking onto her face. And by 17 weeks, it is focusing intensely on the mother's eyes and her internal emotional state. The infant's brain is literally wiring itself to the body language and the right hemisphere of its primary caregiver. It is desperately seeking emotional safety so it can build that OFC filter. Now, this is where it gets psychologically really deep. In the famous dual television experiment, researchers had infants interact with their mothers through a live video screen. The infant smiles, the mother smiles back instantly. Boom, shared emotional harmony. But when the researchers secretly switched the feed to a pre-recorded video of the mother smiling, the infant showed severe, immediate distress. Even though the face on the screen was happy, the infant's brain could sense the tiny micro-lag in response. The emotional harmony was broken. The infant instinctively realized, she isn't really feeling me. Because babies don't just need to look at a happy face, they require live, synchronous emotional harmony to feel secure enough to let their brains develop properly. Section 4. The vicious cycle. The inheritance of stress. So what happens when that harmony is absent? What happens when a parent is totally overwhelmed by modern anxieties, working 2 jobs, a failing marriage, just trying to survive? Dr. Gabor Mate presents this incredibly compelling theory that ADHD is very often a family disorder, born from a devastating invisible loop. Step 1. Parental stress and anxiety completely disrupt that vital emotional harmony. The parent is physically in the room, sure, but mentally, they're frantic. Step 2. Because the infant feels this profound disconnect, their developing brain lacks the rush of dopamine it desperately needs to build the OFC. Step 3. Fast forward a few years, and ADHD symptoms like intense impulsivity and lack of focus start to emerge in the child. Step 4. Those behavioral issues cause massive tension in the household, which feeds right back into the parental stress, starting the whole cycle over again. The stressful environment is literally starving the developing brain. And the collateral damage of this cycle? It's staggering. To put it into perspective, the divorce rate among parents of children with ADHD is 3 times higher than the national average. It creates this crucible of continuous tension and misunderstanding that just tears families apart from the inside out. Now, you might be asking a very logical question here. Wait, lots of people are stressed. Why doesn't every child with stressed parents develop ADHD? And that is the crucial distinction. ADHD itself isn't purely inherited. What is inherited is a high genetic sensitivity. It's a deep, profound susceptibility to your early emotional environment. It's a combination of the environmental conditions, the stress, the emotional distance, the trauma, meeting a specific genetic makeup that is hypersensitive to that exact stress. It's the loaded gun, and the environment pulls the trigger. Section 5. Unconditional acceptance. Rewiring the mind. But here is where we find hope. If the brain was shaped by its environment, can it be reshaped? The answer is a massive, resounding yes. As Dr. Marion Cleaves points out, the mammalian brain is able to respond to environmental changes even at an advanced age. This is the beautiful science of neuroplasticity. It means that even an adult dealing with ADHD, someone who might be carrying decades of rock-bottom self-esteem, deep shame, and chaotic habits, can actually rewire their emotional memory and change the physical structure of their brain. You are never, ever permanently broken. So, how do we actually do it? Dr. Carl Rogers coined a profound concept: unconditional acceptance. Because ADHD is so deeply rooted in an early disruption of emotional security, the healing process has to begin by providing absolute security. It means looking at the person, or honestly, looking at yourself in the mirror, and proving that they are loved and accepted no matter the chaos, no matter the forgotten appointments, the constantly messy rooms, or the sudden emotional outbursts. What does this actually look like in the real world? First, it means abandoning punitive timeouts for kids with ADHD. To a brain that is already hypersensitive to abandonment, a timeout doesn't feel like discipline. It feels like a terrifying threat of rejection. Second, we have to replace our natural judgment with what experts call curiosity mixed with kindness. Ask why the behavior happened. Don't just punish the end result. Third, use medications like Ritalin strategically. They are not magic cures, but they provide the essential dopamine the OFC needs to temporarily function, giving the person a window to build good habits. And finally, you have to address the deep underlying shame through psychotherapy. Because so often, the addiction, the procrastination, the isolation, it's all just a desperate attempt to escape the pain of feeling fundamentally flawed. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Will you choose to fight the flood, or will you learn to understand the water? ADHD is not a deficit of attention. It is an overwhelming, exhausting abundance of it, crashing into a mind that simply wasn't given the filter to handle it. Whether you are navigating this yourself or loving someone who is, the path forward isn't through force, it's not through shame, and it's certainly not through judgment. It is through radical empathy, deep psychological understanding, and unconditional acceptance. Thank you for watching this explainer. I'll see you next time.